How did my sister's 2 a.m. knock destroy everything I tried to save? The knocking wouldn't stop. 3 hits. Pause. 3 more. I pulled myself off the couch and checked the peephole. Nora stood under the hallway light. Mascara streaked down her face, breathing hard like she'd been running. I opened the door, and she pushed past me without saying anything. Went straight to my kitchen and turned on the faucet. I asked what was wrong. She didn't answer, just stood there staring at the running water with her hands hovering over the sink. That's when I noticed her knuckles were scraped raw. Her shirt had a tear at the shoulder. I asked if she was okay, and she turned off the water. She looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize and said she needed my help, but I couldn't ask questions. I said that wasn't how this worked. She grabbed my arm and said, "Please, just this once. Don't ask. Just help me." I told her to sit down, but she said there wasn't time. Said she needed to leave the city tonight and needed me to drive her somewhere. I asked where, and she said she'd tell me in the car. I asked if she was in danger, and she said not anymore. Those 2 words made my chest tight. Not anymore meant something had changed. Meant something happened between whenever this started and right now, standing in my kitchen at 2 a.m. I grabbed my keys and told her we'd go, but she had to give me something. Had to tell me enough so I knew what I was helping with. She said she went somewhere tonight and things escalated quickly. Said she had to get out fast. Said now she needed to make sure there was no trail back to her. I asked what kind of trail, and she said something that would tie her to what happened. Something that needed to disappear. We got in my truck, and I started driving toward the interstate. She kept checking the side mirror like she expected headlights to appear behind us. I asked if anyone knew she came to me, and she said no. Said she'd been careful. Drove around for 30 minutes before coming to my apartment to make sure nobody followed. I asked who would be following her, and she said maybe nobody. Or maybe someone who wanted answers about tonight. I merged onto the highway and asked where we were actually going. She said she had something stashed that needed to disappear completely. I asked what it was, and she said she couldn't tell me yet. Said the less I knew right now, the better, but she needed me to trust her. I asked if whatever happened tonight was bad, and she nodded. I asked if anyone was hurt, and she went quiet. Then she said yes, someone got hurt. I took the exit she pointed to, and we ended up at a 24-hour laundromat in a part of town I didn't recognize. The parking lot was nearly empty, just one other car near the entrance. She told me to stay in the truck. She went inside and I watched through the window as she went to a row of lockers against the back wall. She opened one with a key and pulled out a plastic grocery bag. She stood there for a moment, just holding it. Then she came back to the truck and got in without saying anything. I asked why she'd hidden something in a random laundromat. She said because keeping it anywhere connected to her was too risky. Said if anyone came looking, they'd search the obvious places first. She'd stashed it here hours ago, planning to deal with it later, but now later was here, and it needed to be gone. I drove for another 40 minutes until we reached an industrial area near the old factory district. Dumpsters lined the back of abandoned buildings. I parked and told her I wasn't going any further, until she told me what we were disposing of. She held the bag tight and said it was something from tonight. Something that would connect her to what happened. I reached for the bag and she pulled it back. She said I shouldn't look. Said it would be better if I could honestly say I never saw what was inside. I said that logic didn't make sense because I was already helping her get rid of it. She said there was a difference between helping dispose of a bag and knowing exactly what was in it. She made me promise not to open it. Just throw it away and forget about it. I took the bag without opening it and walked to the nearest dumpster. It felt heavier than I expected. I threw it in and covered it with garbage that was already there. When I got back to the truck, Nora was crying. Not sobbing, just silent tears running down her face. I asked if she was hurt anywhere, and she touched her lip. I saw it was split. Her left cheekbone looked swollen under the streetlight. I asked what happened to her, and she said someone got aggressive tonight. Someone who didn't take no for an answer. I asked if she defended herself, and she nodded. I asked how badly the other person was hurt, and she said she didn't know. Said she left before she could check. I asked why she didn't call the police and she laughed bitterly. She said calling the police would have made everything worse. We drove back to the city in silence. When we got to my apartment, she said she was going to stay with her friend Priya for a while. I asked how long and she said until she knew it was safe. I asked what safe meant, and she said safe meant knowing nobody was looking for her. Safe meant knowing the person from tonight wasn't going to report what happened. I asked how she'd know that and she said she'd watch the news. Check online. See if anything came up. I told her this sounded like a terrible plan, and she said it was the only plan she had. She hugged me and said thank you for not asking too many questions. Said I was the only person she could trust. Then she left. I stood in my apartment trying to process what I'd just done. 3 days passed without hearing from her. I texted asking if she was okay. She sent back one word, fine. I asked if she was still at Priya's. She said yes. I asked if anything had come up. She said no. On the 4th day, my phone rang while I was at work. Unknown number. I answered, and a man's voice asked if I was Gavin Mercer. I said yes. He said his name was Detective Kyle Brendan, and he was investigating a missing person case. Said my sister Nora's name had come up, and he needed to ask me some questions. My blood went cold. I asked who was missing. He said a man named Derek Finch. Said Nora had been seeing him and he hadn't been heard from in 4 days. Said his family reported him missing when he didn't show up for work. I said I didn't know anyone named Derek. He asked when I'd last seen my sister. The question felt like a trap. I knew the real answer was 4 days ago at 2 a.m. when she showed up at my door scared and hurt. But I also knew she'd told me to keep quiet about that night. I said it had been a couple weeks. The lie came out automatically. He asked if Nora had mentioned anyone she was dating. I said she didn't really talk to me about that stuff. He asked if she'd seemed upset or worried recently. I said not that I'd noticed. He said he'd like me to come down to the station to answer a few more questions. I said I didn't know anything that would help. He said sometimes people know more than they realize. He gave me the address and said anytime this week would work. He hung up. I sat at my desk staring at my phone. Derek Finch. Missing. Whatever was in that bag had something to do with him. I called Nora immediately, and she answered on the first ring. I told her a detective just called asking about someone named Derek Finch. There was a long silence. Then she said, that was the person from that night. The person who got hurt. I asked if Derek was actually missing or just avoiding people, and she said she didn't know. Said she'd been checking news sites and police reports and saw a small article this morning. Man reported missing by his family. She said she didn't think it would happen this fast. She said we needed to be careful what we told police. I said I'd already told the detective I hadn't seen her in weeks. She said good. Said stick to that story. The next morning, Detective Brendan called again. He said they'd pulled phone records. Nora's phone had pinged off a tower near my apartment the night Derek went missing. He asked if I was sure I hadn't seen her that night. My heart raced. I said maybe I was confused about the timeline. He asked what that meant. I said maybe she had stopped by briefly and I forgot. He asked what time. I said I wasn't sure. Maybe around midnight. He said her phone showed she was there from 2 a.m. until almost 4 a.m. I said I'd been asleep and didn't realize how long she stayed. He said that was interesting because wouldn't I have woken up when she arrived? I said I was a heavy sleeper. He said my story kept changing. He said lying to police in a missing person investigation was a crime. He said he wanted me to come to the station today, not later this week. Today. I went to the station that afternoon. Detective Brendan took me to an interview room. He sat across from me and said he knew I was lying. Said he just didn't know why yet. He asked what happened the night Derek went missing. I said I already told him everything. He said I'd told him 3 different versions. He asked if Nora had brought anything to my apartment that night. I said, not that I remember. He asked if she left with anything. I said I don't think so. He asked if I drove anywhere with her. I hesitated too long. He leaned forward. He said witnesses saw my truck leaving my apartment complex around 2:30 a.m. that night. Saw it return around 6 a.m. He asked where I went. I said maybe I went to get food. He asked which restaurant was open at 2:30 a.m. I couldn't think of an answer. He asked if Nora was with me. I said I wanted to talk to a lawyer. Detective Brendan said I was free to go but shouldn't leave town. Said if Derek turned up dead, everyone who lied would be charged. I left feeling trapped. I called a public defender. His name was Paul Soren. He said I needed to stop talking to police immediately. Asked if I'd helped Nora dispose of anything. I said I wanted to know if our conversation was confidential. He said it was. I told him I'd helped her throw away a bag. He asked if I knew what was in it. I said no. I never looked inside. He said that vagueness wouldn't protect me. Said I'd still tampered with something even if I didn't know exactly what it was. He said I was in serious trouble. 2 days later, Detective Brendan called. He said they'd found Derek. I asked if he was alive. There was a pause. He said no. Derek was dead. My stomach dropped. Detective Brendan said cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Said Derek had bled out from a head wound. Said they were treating it as a homicide. Said everyone who'd lied was now part of a murder investigation. He said they'd gone back to the industrial area I'd mentioned in passing during questioning. Said they'd searched dumpsters there. He said they found something. Found a plastic grocery bag. He asked if I wanted to know what was inside. I didn't answer. He said they found items from the scene. Then he said they found something else. Something that connected me directly. He said they found a men's watch, expensive, silver with a black face, engraved on the back. He read it to me over the phone. To Gavin, for everything you've achieved. Love, Dad. My chest tightened. That watch. My father had given it to me when I graduated college. I'd worn it every single day for 3 years. I looked down at my wrist instinctively. I wasn't wearing it now, hadn't been wearing it for months. I'd assumed I'd lost it somewhere in my apartment. Maybe it fell behind my dresser. Maybe it was in a drawer somewhere. Detective Brendan asked if that was my watch. I said I'd lost a watch like that. He said this one had Derek's blood on it. Tested positive. He said that meant I was likely at the scene. Meant I didn't just help dispose of a bag. Meant I might have been there when Derek was killed. I said that wasn't true. He said then, how did my watch end up in that bag with blood on it? I said I didn't know. He said I should think very carefully about my next move. Then he hung up. I sat there frozen. The watch. How did my watch end up in that bag? I tried to remember that night. Nora showing up, getting in my truck, driving to the laundromat, throwing away the bag. But there were gaps. Blank spaces I couldn't fill in. Had I been somewhere else that night? Had I gone to Derek's apartment? The more I tried to remember, the more confused I became. I remembered opening my door. I remembered Nora's face. I remembered driving. But there were hours I couldn't account for. Hours that felt like they'd been erased. I called Nora. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. I texted her. Said we needed to talk about the watch. She texted back an hour later. Said don't contact me again. Said everything I did made things worse. I called Paul, told him about the watch. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said this changed everything. Said the watch connected me directly to the crime scene. Said even if I didn't remember being there, the evidence suggested I was. He asked if there was any chance I'd been at Derek's apartment that night. I said I didn't think so. He said I needed to be certain. Said uncertainty wouldn't help me in court. He said I needed to tell police everything I remembered about that night. Every detail, even the gaps, especially the gaps. He said if I couldn't remember something, that was important information too. He said we needed to figure out why my watch was there before the prosecution did. I spent that night trying to reconstruct the evening. I'd been home watching a movie, fell asleep on the couch around midnight, woke up to the knocking. That part I remembered clearly. Nora at my door, her injuries, the panic in her eyes, getting in the truck, driving. But then things got fuzzy. I remembered the laundromat, watching her through the window, the bag. But were there other stops before that? Had we gone somewhere else first? I tried to picture the drive but couldn't. It was like trying to see through fog. The harder I focused, the less clear it became. I looked at my phone, checked my location history. It showed me at home until 2:17 a.m., then movement. But the next recorded location wasn't until 6:03 a.m. back at my apartment. Nearly 4 hours with no data. I called Paul again, told him about the location gap. He said that was concerning. Said it suggested my phone had been off or in airplane mode during that time. Asked if I remembered turning it off. I said no. He said someone else could have turned it off. Asked if Nora had access to my phone that night. I said maybe. I couldn't remember. He said we needed to prepare for the possibility that I'd been at Derek's apartment, that I'd been involved in some way, even if I couldn't remember. He asked if I'd ever had memory issues before. Blackouts. Gaps. I said no. Never. He said trauma could cause memory suppression, so could shock, so could guilt. He said I needed to see someone, a psychiatrist, someone who could help me figure out what really happened that night. I met with Dr. Rachel Emerson 2 days later. She specialized in trauma and memory. I told her about that night, about Nora showing up, about the gaps in my memory, about the watch. She asked detailed questions. What did I feel when Nora arrived? What did I smell? What did I hear? She said memory isn't like video footage. It's reconstructed each time we recall it. Sometimes our brain fills in gaps with what makes sense, what feels right, not necessarily what actually happened. She asked if I wanted to remember. I said yes. She said that wasn't always true. Said sometimes our brain protects us from things we can't handle, things that would break us if we had to face them fully. We did several sessions. She used different techniques, guided meditation, cognitive interviewing, trying to unlock whatever was buried. During one session, I remembered more details, remembered Nora in my truck, her hands shaking. She was holding something, a phone, but not her phone, a different one, bigger, in a black case. She kept looking at it, scrolling through something. I asked whose phone it was, and she said it didn't matter, said she'd get rid of it later, but I didn't remember her having a phone at the laundromat, just the bag. Where did the phone go? Dr. Emerson said that was good, said we were accessing more of that night, But she warned me that not every recovered memory was accurate, said I needed to be careful about treating them as absolute truth. Detective Brendan called again, said he wanted to bring me back in for questioning, said they'd found more evidence. I asked what evidence. He said we'd discuss it at the station. I told Paul, and we went together. In the interview room, Detective Brendan laid out photos of Derek's apartment, his kitchen, the living room. Then he showed me a photo of a footprint, a partial print in blood near Derek's body. He said they'd analyzed it. Size 11, same size as my shoes. He asked what size I wore. I said 11. He asked if I'd ever been to Derek's apartment. I said I didn't think so. He said that wasn't a no. He showed me another photo, a text message from Nora to Derek from 3 weeks earlier. It said, "My brother wants to meet you. Dinner this weekend?" I stared at it. I didn't remember that text. Didn't remember meeting Derek. Paul leaned over and whispered that I shouldn't answer without consulting him first. Detective Brendan said they had phone records showing I'd texted Derek twice, once 3 weeks ago confirming a dinner, once 2 weeks ago thanking him for the meal. I said I didn't remember any of that. He said that was convenient. Paul said this interview was over. We stood to leave. Detective Brendan said one more thing. He said they'd found my fingerprints in Derek's apartment. Not just one, multiple. On the kitchen counter, on a door frame, on a glass in the sink. He said those prints proved I'd been there, proved I'd lied about not knowing Derek. He said I needed to start telling the truth before it was too late. In Paul's office, I broke down, told him I genuinely didn't remember meeting Derek, didn't remember texting him, didn't remember being at his apartment. Paul asked if I'd been drinking heavily around that time, using any drugs. I said no, nothing. He said we needed to consider the possibility that something else was going on, something medical. He referred me to a neurologist, Dr. James Kwan. I went in for tests, MRI, cognitive assessments. Everything came back normal. Dr. Kwan said there was no physical reason for memory loss. He said the most likely explanation was psychological, dissociative amnesia, usually triggered by extreme stress or trauma. He said it was possible I'd experienced something so distressing that my brain had locked it away. I went back to Dr. Emerson, told her about the dinner I didn't remember, the texts I didn't remember sending. She said we needed to dig deeper. She tried hypnosis. I was skeptical, but desperate. Under hypnosis, more details emerged. I remembered sitting at a restaurant, a Thai place downtown. Nora was there, and a man, Derek. He was tall, dark hair, glasses. He seemed nice. We talked about his work. He was in finance. He talked about Nora, how they'd met at a coffee shop, how he'd asked her out 3 times before she finally said yes. I remembered laughing at that, remembered liking him, thinking he was good for Nora. But then the memory fragmented, pieces missing, like frames cut from a film. Dr. Emerson brought me out of hypnosis. She said what I'd recovered seemed genuine, a real memory. But she cautioned that hypnosis could also create false memories, especially if I was trying hard to remember something. She said the brain might construct a memory that felt real, but wasn't. She recommended I tell Detective Brendan about the dinner, about meeting Derek, even if I wasn't certain it was real. Paul disagreed, said admitting I'd met Derek would only make me look more guilty, would prove I'd been lying from the start. He said we needed to stick to the position that I genuinely couldn't remember, that something was wrong with my memory, that I wasn't lying. I was confused, but I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. I called Detective Brendan and told him I wanted to come in, wanted to tell him everything I'd remembered. Paul tried to stop me, but I went anyway, alone. In the interview room, I told Detective Brendan about the Thai restaurant, about meeting Derek, about the texts. I said I hadn't been lying before. I genuinely hadn't remembered, but things were coming back now. He asked why I should believe this new story. I said because I was here voluntarily, because I was trying to tell the truth, even though it made me look guilty. He asked what else I remembered about that night, the night Derek died. I said I remembered Nora showing up, remembered helping her, but there were still gaps, hours I couldn't account for. He asked about the watch, asked how it ended up in the bag. I said I didn't know, asked if maybe it had fallen off earlier, during the dinner weeks before. Maybe I'd left it at Derek's apartment and Nora had found it later. He said that was possible, but it didn't explain the blood, didn't explain why it was in a bag with items from the night Derek died. He said the simplest explanation was that I'd been there that night, that I'd helped Nora, that maybe things had gotten out of hand and I'd blocked it out. I said I didn't think that's what happened. He said what I thought didn't matter. What mattered was evidence, and the evidence said I was there. I left the station feeling worse than before. I'd admitted to lying, admitted I'd known Derek, admitted I'd been to his apartment. All I'd done was make myself look guiltier. Paul was furious when I told him. Said I'd just handed the prosecution their case. Said there was no way to defend me now. He said I needed to prepare for the possibility of a plea deal. Said if I pled guilty to obstruction and evidence tampering, maybe I could avoid the accessory charge. Maybe get 5 years instead of 15. I asked what would happen to Nora. He said that wasn't his problem. His job was to minimize my sentence, not protect her. 3 days later, they arrested me, charged me with obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and accessory after the fact to murder. My bail was set at $200,000. I couldn't afford it. I called my parents. They lived in Oregon. Hadn't spoken to them in months. My dad answered. I told him what happened. There was a long silence. Then he asked if I'd done it, if I'd helped kill someone. I said I didn't know, didn't remember. He said that wasn't an answer. I said it was the only answer I had. He said he'd call me back. He didn't. My mom did. 2 days later. She said they'd talked it over. They'd put up their house as collateral for bail. But I needed to promise them I'd tell the truth. Whatever that truth was, even if it meant going to prison, I promised. I got out on bail and went back to Dr. Emerson. Told her I needed to know what really happened that night. Needed to remember everything, even if it destroyed me. She said we'd try something called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It was used for trauma, for PTSD. She said it might help unlock the memories I'd suppressed. We started the sessions. During the third one, something broke loose. I remembered being in a car, not my truck. A different car, smaller. I was in the passenger seat. Nora was driving. We were going somewhere. I asked where, and she said we had to fix something, had to make something right. I asked what, and she said I'd understand when we got there. We pulled up to an apartment building. I recognized it from the photos Detective Brendan had shown me. Derek's building. We went inside, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Nora had a key. We went into Derek's apartment. The lights were off. I asked where Derek was, and Nora said he was at work. Said we had 20 minutes before he got home. She went to the bedroom, started going through drawers. I asked what she was looking for, and she said something Derek took from her. Photos. She said he'd been threatening to share them if she broke up with him. Said she needed to get them back before things got worse. I helped her search. Found nothing. Then we heard the door. Derek was home early. He came in and saw us. Started yelling, asking what we were doing in his apartment. Nora tried to explain, tried to calm him down, but he was furious. He grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the door, said he was calling the police. She pulled away. He grabbed her again harder. She pushed him. He stumbled back, hit the counter. That's when I stepped in, told him to let her go. He turned on me, started yelling that we'd broken into his apartment, that he'd have us both arrested. He grabbed his phone, started to dial. Nora grabbed a wine bottle from the counter, heavy glass. She swung it, connected with the side of his head. He went down hard, hit the floor, didn't move. I remembered kneeling next to him, checking for a pulse. It was there, but weak. There was blood, so much blood, pooling under his head. Nora was panicking, saying we had to call 911. I pulled out my phone, started to dial, then stopped, looked at her, asked if anyone knew we were here. She said no. I said, then maybe we shouldn't call. Maybe we should just leave, let someone else find him. She said, we couldn't do that. He might die. I said he might die anyway, even if we called. And then we'd go to prison. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me, like she was seeing someone else, someone she'd never met. I said I was trying to protect her, protect us. She said this wasn't protection. This was murder. But we didn't call. We cleaned up, wiped down surfaces, took the bottle, took anything we'd touched. My watch must have fallen off during the cleanup. I didn't notice. We put everything in a bag. Nora changed her shirt. There was blood on it. She put it in the bag too. We left, took the elevator down, got in the car. That's when she turned off both our phones, said we couldn't have them tracking us. We drove to her apartment. She grabbed some things. Then we went to the laundromat. She stashed the bag, said we'd deal with it later. Then she drove me home, dropped me off. Said she'd come back later to get the bag. Said we needed to make sure we weren't followed. She left. I went inside, sat on my couch trying to process what we'd done, what I'd done. At 2 a.m., she came back. The knocking. 3 hits, pause, 3 more. But in my mind, I'd already rewritten it, already created a version where I wasn't there, where I didn't tell her not to call 911, where I didn't help clean up, where I was just the good brother helping his sister in trouble. My brain had protected me from what I'd actually done, from the choice I'd made to let Derek die. Dr. Emerson pulled me out of the memory. I was crying, shaking She asked if I believed what I'd just remembered. I said yes. It felt real, felt true in a way nothing else had. She said I needed to tell someone, needed to tell my lawyer, needed to tell the police. I said I couldn't admit what I'd done. She said living with the lie would destroy me more than the truth ever could. I called Paul, told him I'd remembered everything, told him what actually happened that night. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said this changed everything. Said if that's what really happened, I wasn't just an accessory. I was part of the killing. I'd made the choice not to call for help. That made me responsible for Derek's death. He said I could be charged with second-degree murder, or at minimum, manslaughter. He said my only option now was to work out a deal with the prosecution, tell them everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. He said it might be the difference between 15 years and 30. I met with Detective Brendan and the prosecutor, a woman named Jennifer Walsh. I told them everything. The break-in, Derek coming home, the fight, the bottle, the choice not to call for help, the cleanup, all of it. Jennifer asked why I should believe this version when I'd told so many others. I said, because this was the truth, the complete truth. She asked why I'd suppressed the memory. I said, because I couldn't live with what I'd done. My brain had protected me by erasing it. She asked if I had proof of the memory suppression. I gave her Dr. Emerson's contact information. Jennifer said she'd consider a deal, said she'd need to verify my story, compare it with the forensic evidence. If it matched, she might recommend 20 years instead of life. They arrested Nora again, brought her in for questioning, confronted her with my statement. She denied everything at first, said I was lying, making things up to save myself. But then they showed her the details I'd provided, details only someone who was there would know, the wine bottle, the photos she'd been looking for, the exact position of Derek's body. She broke, admitted I was telling the truth, admitted we'd both been there, admitted we'd made the choice together not to call for help. She said she'd wanted to save him, but I'd convinced her not to, said I'd told her it would ruin both our lives, that we needed to protect each other. She said she'd gone along with it because I was her brother, because she trusted me. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution laid out everything. The break-in, the confrontation, the killing, the cover-up. They showed the jury photos of Derek's apartment, photos of his body, photos of the wine bottle with Nora's fingerprints, photos of my watch with Derek's blood. They brought in Dr. Emerson to testify about the memory suppression. She explained how trauma could cause the brain to block out events, how memory could be recovered through therapy. The defense argued that Derek had been violent, that he'd grabbed Nora, that she'd acted in self-defense, that what happened after was panic, not premeditation. But the prosecution kept hammering one point. We'd had a choice. Derek was alive when we left, injured but alive. We'd chosen not to call for help. That choice had killed him. The jury deliberated for 8 days. They found Nora guilty of voluntary manslaughter. They found me guilty of second-degree murder. The difference came down to who'd made the decision not to call for help. The prosecution had successfully argued that I was the one who'd stopped Nora from calling, that I was the one who'd insisted we clean up and leave. That made me more culpable. The judge sentenced Nora to 15 years. She sentenced me to 25 years to life. I stood there as the sentence was read, feeling nothing, just emptiness. My parents sat in the courtroom crying. My mom kept saying she didn't understand how her son could do this. My dad just sat there staring straight ahead like he'd already erased me from his life. I was sent to Cedar Junction Correctional Facility, maximum security. The first year was the hardest, learning how to survive inside, learning the rules, learning who to trust and who to avoid. I kept to myself mostly, worked in the kitchen, read books from the library, tried not to think about Derek, about his family, about what I'd taken from them, but it was impossible not to think about it, especially at night, in my cell, with nothing but darkness and silence and the weight of what I'd done. I'd see Derek's face, see him falling, see the blood, see myself standing there, making the calculation, weighing his life against my future, and choosing wrong. I tried to write a letter to Derek's family, tried to explain, tried to apologize, but what could I say? Sorry I let your son die. Sorry I valued my freedom more than his life. Sorry I'm a coward who couldn't face the consequences of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I wrote 6 drafts, threw them all away. There were no words that could make it right, no apology that could bring him back, no explanation that justified what I'd done. So I stopped trying, stopped pretending there was a way to fix it, accepted that this was my life now. 4 walls, steel bars, and the knowledge that I deserved every day of it. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.